As you may or may not know, the Disney Corporation celebrated its 100-year anniversary just this week. And that got me thinking, what connections does our community have of Chino and Chino Hills to Disney? Well, in my research, I found one name and one person who has some deeply rooted connections with Disney and some iconic animated Disney films. Welcome back to Chino and the Hills Secrets Exposed. Hi, I am your host, Thomas Ryan, and in today's video, we will be sitting down and speaking with that one person, Mr. John Ramirez, learn about his connections to Disney as both an animator and a storyboard writer, as well as his connections with global amusement park design and the Pasadena Rose Bowl Parade. Let's get into it. Take it away, John.
So my name's John Ramirez, and I've been a Chino Hills resident, I think about 25 years. Growing up, of course, I loved watching all kinds of cartoon shows and, old sitcoms that we all grew up with. And I used to think, these are funny things, interesting shows, interesting stories. A lot of silly stuff. It's all pop culture now. And I used to think, this is important somehow. So, my early influences were all the great cartoon shows we saw as kids. And it's the same for all of my friends in animation. But I particularly loved animation from Japan. Old robots and Ultraman, these shows. And I realized later how much they influenced my color choices when I color things, all based on what those cartoons looked like. My friend in elementary school, I went over to his house, and he was Japanese from Hawaii. And I walked into his room and I saw these boxes of toys that his grandma sent him from Japan. And it blew my mind because there were such wonderful graphic shapes. And the coloring on the boxes was so unique. And the lettering, I thought, what is this? It's not English. My first encounter with Japanese culture. And he said, oh yeah, you can watch these shows on TV this weekend. And it changed my life. In my family, my mom's dad used to doodle a lot. And on my father's side, my grandmother used to doodle a lot. So I think I got the doodling gene from the two of them. I had to, because I think I'm the only artist in the family. My daughter can draw, but she doesn't often do it, which always surprises me. I grew up with people telling me, oh, I used to draw as a kid and I don't do it anymore. And I thought to myself, how could you not? I love drawing. Every day I get up, I'm drawing. The only days I don't draw is if I'm sick. When I was in junior high, I met, and I went to Rincon Junior High in West Covina. It doesn't even exist anymore. The animation teacher there, Dave Master, used to tell us, there are these great jobs where there were these artists that we admired as kids, right? This was an animation class that I was in, and we looked at the artwork and the cartoons of Chuck Jones, Disney's Nine Old Men, which two of them were Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson. So any old Disney classic from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s were primarily done by these nine old men. They directed most of the films and knew Walt Disney personally. They wrote what we consider the Bible of animation, Disney's Art of Animation, which is a really thick book. And so every animator of my generation read this cover to cover, talked about the 12 principles of animation. My teacher used to tell us, you guys can work at the studios too. There's no reason why you couldn't. And my friends and I always remembered that. But he also used to say, you just learn, the principles of art and design, and you can apply them anywhere. So that's what I did. This year, the Disney Studio celebrates being in business 100 years. And the Rose Parade celebrates celebrating, I think it's over 120 years now. And so as an artist growing up in Southern California, as a kid, I used to watch these events and think, I want to contribute. I was so anxious just to get in the business and start working back. We had a recruiter from Disney come out to our high school, and I had already been a theme park designer for a couple of years, but my ultimate goal was to get into Disney. And the Disney animators I knew said I just needed seasoning. So I went and got seasoned. So when the recruiter came to our high school, I was still in the adult program then. He said, well, why don't you come and I'll set up an interview for you. So I went down to the studio. I'm really happy about this because I beat a friend of mine by 2 hours getting hired at Disney. He ended up working on Nightmare Before Christmas as an animator and was hired 2 hours later. So you can imagine, because of this animation program that I was in for so many years, and we were still very close-knit, that I was proud to be the first student to be hired at the studio at age 20-something. Yeah. They sat me down at an animation desk, handed me a scene. It was The Great Mouse Detective, and there were some key drawings, and I had to do in-betweens. So what that means is the animator drew a drawing A and a drawing B, and then I would fill in the drawings in between based on how he wanted them. And I did. I was so comfortable with the tools, with the paper, because I used to make animated films myself with the same exact things. Stuff that the animation studios would donate to our program. They gave us big animation desks and cameras, and they gave us money to buy equipment. We had really great supporters who were all in the business working. So I did it, finished it in, an hour or something, just felt really comfortable. And I was in a room with a couple other people, but I never did see them again. Funny thing was that when they returned my portfolio to me, they left the note that I had finished it in less time than anyone had ever done. So I should be hired. So I got hired. My first project was Beauty and the Beast. Well, let me tell you, when I started on Beauty and the Beast, nobody thought that film was going to be successful. And I looked at it and I thought, why are they thinking this? I realized later it's because of the really delicate drawings we had to do, that so many artists had to, we use mechanical pencils, which you can't draw easily characters with emotions with mechanical pencils. But the drawings had to be very precise. And that's why everyone was hurting, their arms were hurting, so they weren't happy. But then one day, the producer, Don Hahn, comes in at lunch and he plays the song, Peeble Bryson, and I forget the name of the woman who's singing, big Las Vegas singer. The two of them are singing and we're listening to this, and it's a pop song. Disney's never done that before. And we thought, wow, that sounds really amazing. And then everyone started to think, well, maybe we got something here. And then when Glenn Keane was creating the Beast character, he pulled from baboons and buffaloes and bears, looking to combine these elements to create the Beast, to make him appealing but still ugly. And I remember the teeth like a boar coming out. It's something that Leonardo da Vinci used to do to create dragons and mythical creatures. He pulled from animals he knew. And one of the reasons why we did that was so that the beast would feel more realistic. Because we all know how these animals move, but in our brains we can combine them to believe this is how the beast would move. And so that's the genius of Disney animation, is being able to do these things. Knowing how people think, being able to tell stories that people will love, not just in the United States, but all over the world. And then I went on to work on Aladdin. The funny thing is, I worked on the villains on Aladdin, and I worked on Scar and Lion King. And the animator I worked for, Andreas Deja, is one of the nicest people you'd ever meet. But he got to draw the villains. And he's such a big Disney geek. And the reason why he loved the villains is because of the chance to really do some great acting. And then I thought, this is good. I love doing the animation. I realized I didn't want to be an animator. I wanted to be a story artist. We would get a script. Somebody wrote, a basic outline or the premise for, let's say, Hercules. The directors wrote that story. Knowing that they were going to hire a team of story artists to look at the script and develop it visually. So we're sort of making a comic book version of it. And as we read the script and figure out how that can look visually, where the story would take place, how we would place the camera for the strongest storytelling. If the directors approved it, then it would move on to different aspects of the animation process. Parts of it would go to the layout department, background. The scenes would be set up so the animators would know what they had to animate, and very often they would look at our poses of how we created the characters and then copy them. Or use them as inspiration and take them a step further. And over a couple years, we would develop, let's say, Hercules. It took us about 2 years to develop the story and do the animation. And there were so many different artists involved in the making of these films. So I storyboarded on Hercules, on Tarzan, Toy Story 2, and then moved to Warner Brothers and Looney Tunes Back in Action. And I art directed on a Tom and Jerry cartoon. Really fun stuff. I've been lucky in my experiences to work on really interesting projects, not just at Disney, but developing theme parks. I had helped to develop mascots for a park in Korea called Lotte World. The Lotte company in Asia is a big candy company, and one of my first projects was I was hired as a cartoonist in a company full of architects, and it was a theme park design company in Orange County. So I got all the fun stuff. We were laying out a dark ride. I got to create the scenes. They needed a parade. I got to create the floats, what the costumes look like. Develop the mascots for the park. Much like some of Disney's animators used to do, and I used to envy how they could move from theme park to animation and back and forth. Well, I got to do that too. And I was designing these characters for this theme park, right? And have continued to work for this park designing parades. And so one day I'm in Brazil in an airport, and this was just after Beauty and the Beast, and I catch this kid walking across the airport. She's wearing a Beauty and the Beast backpack, carrying one of my dolls from Korea. And I thought, oh my God, I designed her childhood. My work in Taiwan, as I was designing a parade for a theme park there, the company that was building the floats went out of business. So my producer needed a new float company. And being in Los Angeles, we have float companies because we have the Pasadena Rose Parade. And so we met a new builder in Azusa, and we're in a meeting, and we have to explain each float. And so I just start drawing as we're talking. I'm drawing the floats, and the president of this company says, my designer is retiring. Would you be interested in working for me designing Pasadena Rose Parade floats? And I thought, oh yeah, that would be great. My family has always watched the Rose Parade, January 1st, and I always wanted to design them, but never knew how to get in. And that was 16 years ago. So I've been doing it ever since. And it's unique every year. You'd think that it might just be a few months of work, but it's a year-round job. Designing a Rose Parade float, I always looked at it, and the animation business is the same way. It's like a relay race, but I start out the race with my concepts, figuring out that, this is what the client wants, this is what works for a Rose Parade float, and I hand it off to the engineers who use their expertise to actually make it in 3 dimensions. And then we hand it off to guys who work in metal and carpenters, and they have to take what I drew, which is really paper and pencil, and make it in steel and metal and framework and welding. And that's great because we have these big old chassis that are 55 feet long, and they build it from there and make it huge. And then we have these huge metal structures inside that bend and move, and just for one day's performance. And then on top of that, we have florists who use their talent to figure out what I designed, how that would look in natural materials, seeds and beans and flowers, fresh flowers, dried flowers, grounded flowers and spices, sometimes mixed up so that we can get really smooth skin or something that's fluffy. Even tree bark is used to make like hair on a giant dog. I think one great aspect of living in Chino Hills and working on the Rose Parade is wherever I can, I like to use our cheerleaders, because my daughter's a cheerleader, and bring them in onto a float to get them to dance. We did it for the float a couple years ago for Reese's University. We had dancers from Chino Hills High School. So every chance I get, I propose it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I gotta tell you, I know that there are other people that work for Disney in different capacities that live in Chino Hills. And it's funny the way that it will come up, because I was with my uncle driving near his home down Carbon Canyon, and it was at nighttime, and we saw this house that had all these great lights on it, and it really stood out. Beautiful lighting. He says, oh yeah, that guy worked at Disneyland, he did the lighting. And when I was living in another part of Chino Hills, my neighbor did the landscaping for Disneyland, which made sense because his landscaping was great. I can remember when there was only like one way in and out, and when Grand Avenue opened up, we'd sometimes sneakily drive down the road just to get to Diamond Bar quicker than having to go on the 60 freeway. But when I got married and had a family, we moved bigger, but we wanted to stay in Chino Hills. And she goes to the local elementary school down the street, Wickman Elementary. And they had this really strange looking wildcat mascot. And she was just in kindergarten, and I thought, I want to help the school out. So I approached the PTA and said, I'm a former Disney animator. I would love to update the mascot and make it really great, right? Give him pants. because the mascot had no pants. And they said, no thanks, we're happy. Okay. So I joined PTA, and then a whole new group of parents in the program, and I offered again. And so everyone said, oh yes, let's do it. And now when I visit Whitman, and my daughter has long since graduated, it kind of feels like we overdid it, because Winter Wildcat is everywhere. All on murals all over the place, on a lot of signage. I'm actually really proud of the fact now that my character is across the multi-purpose room outside of the school. You can't miss it. You know, I'm really comfortable because I was inspired by such amazing animators, and I'm always happy. I'm always happy to help up-and-coming students. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them for you. You can reach me through the YouTube address. I guess this is on YouTube, right? Or you could probably find me if you look for me online.
Wow, what an experience sitting down with John and learning about his interesting path towards an interesting career and ultimately an iconic company. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting that like button. And if you would like to see more videos just like this one, please consider subscribing to the Thomas Ryan Real Estate YouTube channel or follow me on Instagram. And lastly, if you have a secret in Chino or Chino Hills that you think I should expose, please let me know in the comments below. All right, until next time, have a good day.